Hello everyone, and welcome back. Out here on the loneliest roads in the world, truckers carry more than cargo. We carry nights we don't talk about, moments that stayed with us long after the engine cooled, moments that changed the way we look at the dark. If you're here, it means you're ready to ride with us again. Down the highways where radios go silent, headlights catch things that shouldn't be there, and every mile has its own secret. Before we roll into tonight's story, make sure you subscribe so you never miss another true trucker nightmare. And when it's over, drop a comment and tell me what you think really happened out there. Alright, let's shift into the dark. I've been driving long haul since before half the guys you watch on YouTube were even born behind the wheel. 25 years. Lower 48, Canada, every kind of weather you can imagine. I've seen pileups, grass fires, jackknifed rigs, bodies under tarps, things that'll keep you up at night if you stare too long. But there's only one night that makes my hands sweat just thinking about it. Glacier Road. 2 a.m. in January. It was supposed to be a straightforward temperature-sensitive haul. Insulated food crates in a 53-foot reefer, running up through the mountains to supply a chain of grocery stores that liked their produce there before dawn. I was in a 579 Peterbilt, white cab, company logo on the doors, about 78,000 pounds gross. I'd run that route enough times to know where my Jake brake liked to chatter and where the wind liked to shove the trailer sideways. That night, the weather turned faster than forecast. Dispatch had warned of light snow, possible flurries. By the time I hit the lower grades of Glacier Road, it wasn't flurries. It was a white curtain. High beams didn't help, just made a glowing wall in front of me. I fell back to low beams, fog lights, and that slow, hypnotic sweep of the wipers pushing snow that seemed to refill the glass before each pass. The CB was mostly quiet, just a couple drivers an hour earlier talking about chaining up further north. Then static. My heater hummed, blowing dry, warm air at my boots. The cab smelled like stale coffee, diesel, and that faint plasticky scent of food crates sealed in back. Outside, the world smelled like nothing. Just cold, metallic emptiness, the kind that stings your nose when you breathe too deep. I dropped my speed to about 30, sometimes less. No one behind me, no one ahead that I could see. Felt like the road, the mountain, and me. My steering wheel vibrated in that familiar way, rubber on rough, half-frozen asphalt, just enough to tell me I still had traction. I remember glancing at the mile marker, 41. That's where things started to feel wrong. It wasn't anything big at first, just this sensation, like the road wasn't quite where my eyes said it was. The reflectors on the posts would appear, then vanish in the snow, then appear again but slightly off. I told myself it was low visibility messing with depth perception. Happens all the time. I leaned forward, shoulders tight, hands at 10 and 2. The snowflakes looked bigger now, slower, like I was driving into a field of white ash. The wind pushed at the trailer, then settled. My engine's hum was steady. Everything was standard, explainable. Then I saw him. Not clearly. Not at first. He appeared in my peripheral vision, to the left of the cab, just beyond the edge of my headlight wash. A darker shape in the whiteout. Human-sized, human-shaped, like someone walking along the shoulder. My brain did what most people's brains do when they see something that shouldn't be there. It explained it away. Probably a snow-covered road sign. Maybe a tree trunk where there shouldn't be one. Maybe the way my side mirror caught the shadow of the trailer against the snowbank. I kept driving, but it stayed there. I checked the mirror, nothing but swirling snow. Looked forward again. There he was. A shape, shoulders, head, arms, moving with me step for step, exactly parallel to my cab. That's when I started testing it. I eased off the throttle, letting myself drop 5 miles per hour. The figure slowed too, not like a trick of perspective, not like something fixed on the landscape. It stayed perfectly beside me, matching my speed, as if its boots were hitting the ground in time with the revolutions of my tires. Every rational part of me fought it. Maybe it's a shadow off the median rail. There is no median rail here, just ditch and trees. Maybe it's the reflection of my stacks in the snow. Then why does it swing its arms like it's walking? The wind picked up on the left side, shoving a burst of powder across the lane. The shape didn't flinch, didn't blur, didn't slip on the ice that I knew was under that snow. I realized I was holding my breath. I gripped the wheel harder and forced myself to look at it more directly. That was the mistake. The closer I tried to focus, the less detail I got. It wasn't a man in a coat or a guy in a reflective vest. It was like my eyes refused to lock onto it. Just an absence of light shaped like a person. No color, no texture, just less than the darkness around it. I could feel goosebumps break across my arms under my jacket, even with the heater on full. The air in the cab went wrong. Not colder exactly, thinner, like the oxygen had been watered down. I clicked the CB, anything to hear a human voice. Any traffic northbound on Glacier? Conditions at 41 looking ugly. You boys see any wrecks up there tonight? Static. Then, beneath the static, something like breathing. Slow. Right in my ear under the hiss. Then a faint, wet whisper, like lips trying to form words through snow. I dropped the mic. You don't spook easy after 2 decades on the road. But I swear to you, every hair on my arms was standing straight up. My steering wheel's vibration felt softer now. Duller, like the truck wasn't fully touching the road. Like I'd lifted just a couple inches off the asphalt and was floating on a cushion of air and snow. I checked the clock. 2:14 a.m. Checked the GPS. The screen flickered, recalculated, and for a second showed my position a few miles back, near mile marker 39, before snapping back to 41. The ETA glitched, numbers stuttering. Electrical, I told myself. Snow, moisture, bad signal. But my voice sounded small in that cab. Too loud and too quiet at the same time. The figure was still there, walking, never looking at me, never slowing, just moving through a snowstorm that should have buried a man in seconds. Up ahead, I saw the faint suggestion of a wide turnout, a chain-up area I knew well. Concrete pad, rusted metal trash can, a couple of reflector posts. That spot had saved more than one rookie from sliding downhill sideways. I made a decision that, to this day, I question. I pulled over. I eased onto the shoulder, careful not to jerk the wheel on the ice. My trailer straightened behind me. Brakes hissed. The truck shuddered to a stop. My headlights lit a swirling tunnel of white and gray beyond the turnout. The figure didn't stop. It just kept walking, right past my hood, past my side view, along the left shoulder of the road. Same pace, same swing of the arms. Not even a glance toward 40 tons of metal and lights less than 10 feet away. I sat there, engine idling, wipers clicking, listening to my own heartbeat in my ears. Then I did the second stupid thing of the night. I got out. The cold hit me like a fist. The smell of it was sharp, biting metal and ice and the faintest hint of something electrical, like ozone before a lightning strike. Snow stung my face in fine needles. My boots crunched on the crusted surface. That satisfying sound you get when fresh snow has just started to ice over. The headlights threw long, dancing shadows across the turnout. Diesel rumble vibrated up through my feet, comforting and wrong at the same time. I stepped around the front of the truck, shielding my eyes from the glare, and looked down the road. He was still there, maybe 30 yards ahead now, just at the edge of my headlight reach. A man-shaped absence, moving with that same steady stride. That's when I looked down. There were no footprints. The snow on the shoulder was pristine. Except for my own tracks, leading from the cab to where I stood, the surface was untouched. No line of prints, no scuffs, nothing. Something that had kept pace with me for miles on glare ice, in a blizzard, had never touched the ground. All the warmth left my body at once. Not from the cold, from something deeper like a nerve getting cut. I took one step closer to the edge of the road. The wind dropped, just like that. The sound of the engine dulled, as if it were behind a wall. The snowflakes in front of me seemed to slow in the air, hanging just a fraction longer than they should. For a second, I thought I heard something over the muffled engine. A voice carried on the stillness. Keep moving. I don't know if it was the CB leaking through the speakers or the wind playing tricks in my ears, but it sounded close. Too close. Right at my shoulder. I turned, expecting to see someone standing beside me. No one there. When I looked back down the road, the figure was gone. Just open highway swallowed in white. I don't remember getting back into the cab. I remember the feel of the door handle, ice rough under my glove. I remember the way the interior light flickered once, twice, then steadied, casting a weak glow over the steering wheel and the worn fabric of the seats. I slammed the door, threw it in gear, and eased back onto the road. My hands were shaking enough that I had to choke up higher on the wheel to keep it steady. In the passenger side mirror, for just a heartbeat, I saw it again. Not on the road this time, right beside my door. A shape perfectly still, keeping pace with my moving truck as if it were glued to the metal. No face, no features, just darkness darker than the night around it. Then a gust of crosswind shook the trailer. Snow burst across the mirror, and it was gone. The rest of the drive down the grade is a blur of white and gray and the red glow of my own dashboard. Somewhere around mile marker 34, the storm just broke, like someone had cut a curtain. 1 minute I could barely see 50 feet. The next I was under thin clouds with stars smudged overhead and a pale slice of moon looking down like nothing weird had happened at all. By the time I hit the valley truck stop, my coffee was cold, my fingers ached, and my brain was running on fumes and denial. Inside the diner, it was the usual graveyard shift crew. A couple of local haulers, a snowplow operator half asleep over his pancakes, and an old-timer named Ray I'd seen around more than a few times. I must have looked worse than I thought, because he squinted at me and said, "Glacier got its hooks in you tonight?" I tried to laugh it off. Whiteout. Messed with my head. He stirred his coffee, watching me too carefully. "You see anything walking?" The fork froze halfway to my mouth. "What do you mean?" I asked. He shrugged, but it wasn't casual. Used to be a snowplow driver, went off that stretch about 20 years back. Storm night. Got on the radio, said he'd walked out onto the road to flag a truck down. Never made it. They found the plow. Never found him. He sipped. Some boys say he's still out there. Tries to keep pace with the rigs. Tries to get back to the cab he left. I didn't answer. I just listened to the hum of the refrigerators, the clink of dishes, the faint whistle of wind under the doors. I've run Glacier Road since then. Not in storms. Not if I can help it. But you can't dodge every piece of bad weather in this job. Sometimes you're up there when the sky decides it hates you. And every time the snow thickens into a white wall and the world outside my windshield turns into that glowing tunnel, I can feel it. That thinning of the air. That numbness in my hands. That sense that if I look too far left, I'll see something walking right beside me, matching my speed, waiting for me to stop. So I don't look. I keep my eyes forward, hands steady on the wheel, and I let the wipers carve their brief little window into the storm. But in the dead quiet, when the CB goes to pure static and the road disappears under the snow, I swear I can feel him there, keeping pace, still trying to get back to a truck that isn't there anymore. I've been running freight longer than some dispatchers have been alive. 27 years, mostly refrigerated and dry van, a few seasons on tankers when the money was good enough to risk the nerves. I've hauled through every kind of bad road you can imagine. Black ice, sandstorms, desert heat that cooks the tires from the inside out. But the only time I really considered quitting was after what happened on that mountain run. Name's Paul. I was running solo that week, taking a load of frozen goods up through a mountain corridor the old-timers still call Glacier Spine. 2-lane, no shoulder in some spots. Curves that sneak up on you if you're not married to your mirrors. It was January, a little after midnight, and I was in a blue Cascadia with a 53-foot reefer, grossing just over $76,000. The forecast said, clear, sub-zero, patchy ice. Forecast lied. By the time I hit the first serious grade, the sky had gone that heavy dark where you can't tell clouds from empty space. The stars were muted, like someone had smeared their thumbs across them. The air coming through the vents, superheated to keep the windshield clear, still smelled cold. Metallic, like breathing in a handful of nails. My tires hummed on the packed snow, a tight vibration in the wheel that I could feel all the way up my arms. Every bump, every tiny slide told me exactly how much grip I didn't have. Kept it slow. Low gear, engine brakes soft, no sudden moves. Out here, you twitch, you die. The CB had been quiet most of the night. A couple of guys earlier around the valley town talking about chain laws and how the DOT was sitting at mile marker 18 like vultures. After that, just static with the occasional click of someone keying up and thinking better of it. I like some noise when I drive, even if it's just voices in the background, so I left channel 19 on low, radio hissing quietly under the hum of the engine. The windshield wipers clicked back and forth, pushing away a thin dusting of ice crystals that never seemed to melt, no matter how high I cranked the defrost. Somewhere past mile marker 42, I hit the curve they call Devil's Bend. It's a long, sweeping left-hand turn along a high ridge, nothing between you and the drop-off but a narrow guardrail that looks like it was installed by someone who's never seen a fully loaded rig slide sideways in winter. I eased into it at maybe 25 miles per hour. No traffic behind me, no headlights ahead, just my own beams cutting into the snow haze, making the world outside look like a tunnel of gray and white. That's when the CB crackled. Not just static. Voices. Copy lead. I'm reading your temp. Watch your axle weight over the shelf. The voice was male, mid-range, calm but tight. It came through like they were only a mile ahead, not like some distant skip signal bouncing off the atmosphere. The sound was so clean it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I glanced at the channel display. 19. Same as always. I hadn't heard anybody call out a convoy earlier. No chatter about running together. And I sure as hell didn't see any taillights. Another voice came in, older, more gravel in it. Convoy 3, tighten it up. Ice shelf is cracking ahead. Don't stop on the bridge, you'll punch through. I scanned the road, heart rate ticking up. Ice shelf? There's a short bridge on that stretch, yeah, but it's concrete. Solid. I crossed it 100 times. Where you boys running? I asked, thumb on the mic, eyes never leaving the curve. This is northbound reefer at 42. I don't see anyone ahead of me. No response. Their chatter rolled on like I wasn't there. Copy lead. I'm showing -20 in the box, holding steady. Shelf sounds hollow, you feel that? Keep moving. Don't stop. Nobody stop. I told myself it was bleed over. Some old signal bouncing from God knows where. Maybe a couple of guys on the Canadian side running a different frequency overlapping with mine. Happens sometimes when the atmosphere gets weird. But the air in the cab felt different now. Thinner. My breath came out in short, visible puffs even though the cab was warm. The smell of ozone snuck in under the normal sense. Diesel, plastic from the dash, faint coffee grounds in the cup holder. Like the air had been struck by lightning somewhere I couldn't see. The voices kept talking, more of them now, for maybe 5 drivers. I could hear the engines in the background, the same deep, low rumble mine made under load. Convoy 2, your trailer's walking on you. Yeah, I got her. Damn. Feel that give? Shelf's not holding. Just get across. Do not stop. As I came up on the actual bridge, my headlights picked it up. A short span, guardrails on both sides, snow drifted along the edges. The river below was frozen, black cracks spidering through the ice. I'd been over it in worse weather. It never once sounded hollow. Still, I turned the radio down a notch, listening for anything wrong with my own rig. Any new vibration, any echo, and that's when all hell broke loose in the speakers. Stop! Stop! Back it up! Can't! She's sliding! She's! Metal shrieked. Not from my truck. From theirs. A ripping, tearing sound like a dozen frames twisting at once. Men shouting over each other. A mess of call signs. Red Fox, pull. Tracker 3, you're... God! It's going. Then a sound I never want to hear again. Collective scream. Not one voice. Not two. Chorus. Dozens of men all yelling at once as something gave way under them. The scream kept climbing, cutting through the static, higher, sharper, until it snapped off like someone had ripped the cord out of the wall. Silence. Even the static died for a second. Just the low hum of my engine, the whisper of tires on ice. my own heartbeat in my ears. I realized my hands were clamped so hard on the wheel that my knuckles hurt. The vibration through the steering column felt wrong, softer, like I'd momentarily left the pavement and was riding on something else, something that flexed. I eased off the throttle, let myself roll over the bridge at maybe 10 miles an hour, every instinct in my body screaming not to stop. Don't test it. Don't tap the brakes. Just move. As my front tires hit the midpoint of the span, there was this deep, hollow thump from below. Not loud, felt more than heard, like the mountain had exhaled. The CB crackled back to life. Any units on Glacier Spine? Report position. Last convoy didn't make it. Repeat, last convoy didn't make it. Shelf failed. They're gone. The voice sounded wrong. Too flat, like it was playing back on an old tape. I didn't touch the mic. I just listened, breathing shallow. The voice repeated the message. Same cadence. Same words. Like a loop. Then the channel went back to ordinary static and distant, meaningless noise. I made it off the bridge and around the next bend before my brain fully caught up. I pulled into a small chain-up area, air brakes sighing, hands shaking. Killed my lights, left the engine idling. The darkness outside the cab windows was absolute. No other trucks, no glow of a town. Just the weak halo of my marker lights reflecting off snow. Inside, under the pale dome light, I could see my own breath. That wasn't right. My heater was running full. I reached out, touched the plastic vent. It was hot. The air itself felt cold. I sat there a long minute, listening to the soft ticking of metal cooling, the faint whir of the reefer units cycling in the trailer, and the CB's empty hiss. My skin prickled, waves of goosebumps across my arms under my jacket, like the cab was filled with someone else's breath. Finally, I grabbed the mic. Dispatch, this is Unit 72 on Glacier Spine. You got any convoys running up here tonight? I'm hearing weird chatter. Sounds like a pileup. A pause. Keyboard clacks on the other end. The familiar voice of Morgan, my overnight guy. -72. You're my only rig on that road right now. No convoys logged. You okay? I watched the snow swirling outside, catching in the blink of my marker lights. Yeah, I lied. Roads just playing tricks on my head. Morgan hesitated. You're not the first to say that. I almost asked him what he meant. Almost. Instead, I told him I'd call back at the next truck stop and hung up. I got through the rest of the night without any more voices. No more screams. Just the usual lonely mountain road, the engine's constant drone, and my nerves stretched thin as monofilament. I made delivery just after dawn, signed the papers with a hand that still wouldn't stop shaking, caught a few hours of bad sleep in the sleeper. On my way back through the valley, I stopped at a small truck stop diner that's been there since the 70s. Good coffee, bad pie, real talk. Old-timer named Hank slid onto the stool next to me, the kind of guy whose logbooks probably tell stories the DOT would never believe. We'd talked over the years, swapped routes, complained about rates. You look like hell, Paul, he said, stirring sugar into his coffee. Mountain treating you rough? I considered brushing it off. Instead, I said, you ever pick up chatter on the spine that wasn't there? His eyes flicked up to mine. There was something in them I didn't like. Recognition. What did you hear? He asked quietly. Convoys, ice shelf, screaming, call signs that didn't answer when I called back. I left out the part where the bridge felt hollow under me. I didn't have to say it. He sighed, long and tired. 89, he said. Whole convoy went through an ice fissure up there. Shelf under the bridge gave way. Couple of them made it out on foot. Most didn't. Radios were live for a long time, they say. Last thing anyone heard was them all going over. I stared at him. And now, he said, staring into his coffee. Some nights, when the weather's right and the air's thin enough, the mountain plays it back, like a bad habit it can't shake. He looked at me, dead serious. You get them again, you keep moving. Don't stop to listen. Don't answer when they call. They're not talking to you. I finished my coffee and didn't order pie. That was 8 years ago. I still run freight, still climb that same road when the job calls for it. I've never heard the full screaming again, but every winter, without fail, there's at least one night where the CB crackles, and I catch a familiar phrase slipping through the static like a ghost. Ice shelf is cracking ahead. Sometimes it's just that. Sometimes, if I reach for the mic, I hear a second voice, further away. Convoy 3, tighten it up. That's when I turn the volume down. Not off. Never off. I don't know why. Maybe part of me thinks if I silence them completely, I'll miss something important. Or maybe some sick part of me wants proof it really happened. Because the truth is, I never checked the records. Never pulled the reports. I don't need dates and names to know what my hands felt on that wheel, what my bones felt under that bridge. So I drive. I listen. And when the night gets too quiet and the static on Channel 19 starts to sound like distant engines on a road I can't see, I remind myself, those men aren't ahead of me. They're not behind me. They're somewhere underneath. And every time I cross that bridge in the dark, I can't shake the feeling that if I opened the window and leaned out just a little, I'd hear them clearer. A whole convoy trapped in a loop, still trying to warn each other about ice that gave way a long time ago. I've picked up my fair share of hitchhikers in my time. Not lately. Company policy and common sense beat that out of me years ago. But back when I started, the roads felt emptier, the rules looser, and I still believed most people were worth trusting. My name's Mark. I've been driving long haul for over 20 years, reefer, dry van, the occasional flatbed when they needed a warm body and I needed the miles. This happened about 6 winters ago, somewhere between mile marker 112 and 140 on a mountain highway that likes to chew up rookies and spit them out in ditches. I was in a red Kenworth T680, hauling frozen meats southbound on a tight delivery window. Midnight run, late January, temperature hovering around -15 with the wind chill, the kind of cold that doesn't just sting your face. It sinks into your bones and waits there. The sky was clear, but the kind of clear that feels wrong. No clouds, just muted stars scattered over the black. The moon was a thin slice, enough to paint the snowbanks silver. The road itself was half-plowed, 2 dark grooves cutting through a thin layer of frost, my headlights stretching out in a pale cone, catching road signs and reflective posts as they flashed by. The cab smelled like coffee, old French fries, and the faint plastic tang from the reefer controls. My heater was cranked, fan humming low. I could feel the steady vibration through the wheel and the floor, 70,000 pounds rolling over winter-hardened asphalt, chains rattling soft on the drives. The CB was mostly dead, just static, with the occasional distant voice too muffled to make out. I'd been listening to a late-night AM station fading in and out, some preacher ranting about the end of the world between bursts of static. Eventually I killed it and let the truck be quiet. Sometimes silence is worse than noise. You start hearing things you'd rather not. I just passed mile marker 119 when I saw her. She was standing on the right shoulder, just beyond my high beams, in that weird half-light where you're not sure if your eyes are inventing shapes. I saw motion first, a small, tight shiver, and then the outline of a person. A woman. Thin, wearing what looked like a torn dark jacket over jeans, no hat. Her hair was a stiff, pale mass around her head, like it had been soaked and left to freeze. She had one arm wrapped around herself, the other lifted halfway, not fully waving, just there, alone, in that cold, on that road, at 12:37 a.m., according to my dash. My first instinct was to keep going. You hear the stories, setups, robberies, people stepping out in front of rigs for reasons you'll never understand. You tell yourself it's not your problem. You tell yourself if they made it out there, they can make it a little farther. I rolled past her, watched as she slipped out of the edge of my headlight wash. Then I saw the temperature gauge on the dash. -16 degrees Fahrenheit. No one lasts long in that dressed like that. I drove maybe another quarter mile arguing with myself. Policy, safety, liability, all the practical words that sound real strong until you picture someone freezing to death in your rearview. Finally, I swore under my breath, eased onto the shoulder, and hit the hazards. The truck shuddered as it laid weight into the snow-packed gravel. I checked my mirrors, no headlights behind me, no one cresting the hill ahead. Damn it! I muttered, sliding the passenger side air seat back a little. I leaned over, popped the door lock, and swung the door open. Cold hit the cab in a rush. Not just regular cold, a cutting, knife-edge air that felt like it came straight out of a walk-in freezer. I could smell it. Clean, metallic, sharp. The warm air from the vents rolled out in a visible wave, meeting that cold and turning into faint mist. She was closer than I expected. I hadn't heard footsteps in the snow, no crunch of boots. But there she was at the step, one hand gripping the grab bar, frost coating the ends of her hair like glass. Up close, she looked younger than I thought. Early 20s, maybe. Her jacket was worse than it had looked from the road. One sleeve ripped, zipper busted halfway. Her lips were cracked white. And her eyes looked wrong. The irises were there, a pale gray blue, but the edges were rimmed with frost. Tiny ice crystals gathered along the lashes like someone had sprayed them with freezing rain. When she opened her mouth to breathe, a thick cloud of cold rolled out, spilling into the cab like an industrial freezer door had been left open. "Get in," I said. "You're gonna die out there." She didn't answer, didn't ask where I was going or who I was. She just climbed up into the passenger seat in one slow, deliberate movement, like she'd done it 1,000 times. Her jeans made that stiff scrape against the vinyl. As soon as she settled, the temperature in the cab dropped 10 degrees. I could feel it through my jacket, a sudden bite along my neck. I shut the door and put the truck back into gear, easing back onto the highway. The hazards clicked off. My headlights reached forward into emptiness again. For a while, neither of us spoke. I could hear her breathing slow, steady, a faint wet sound underneath, like lungs that had been too cold for too long. She sat with her hands clamped together in her lap, fingers white, eyes fixed straight ahead. The air around her looked heavier somehow. Every breath she took sent a visible plume of vapor up toward the windshield, where it should have fogged the glass. Didn't. The windshield stayed perfectly clear. "You picked a hell of a place to go hiking," I said, trying to cut the tension. "You got a name? Somewhere I can drop you off." For a second, I thought she wasn't going to answer. Then, softly, without turning her head, she said, "You should have kept driving." Her voice was wrong too. Not eerie, not echoing, just flat, like someone talking through tired lungs in an empty room. I swallowed. "You looked like you needed help." She let that sit for a beat, then turned her head just enough that I could see her profile. Her skin in the dash light looked too pale, with that slight gray-violet tinge you only see in bad hospital wards. "We all do," she murmured. "Out here." Something cold crawled down my spine. I felt the steering wheel vibration dulled under my hands, like there was a thin layer of ice between the tires and the road. My ears popped slightly, the way they do when you change elevation, but we were on a straight stretch. The CB chose that moment to hiss and crackle. A burst of static, then a faint voice. "You still on 112? Wideout picked up. Careful near the turnoff." The signal was weak, full of snow noise. I reached for the mic, eyes on the road. "Yeah, this is southbound reefer at 120. Conditions clear but cold. You boys seeing anything ahead I should know about?" Silence. Then just static, no confirmation, no call sign. Nothing. I set the mic back down slowly. The smell in the cab had changed. Less coffee, less diesel. More of that metallic freezer burn cold. It was like standing in the back of my trailer with the doors open. I risked a quick glance at her. She was looking at me now, directly, and those eyes, the frost along her lashes had thickened, little white spears hanging from the tips. Her pupils looked too wide in the dim light. "You really shouldn't have stopped," she whispered. My hands tightened on the wheel. "Why not?" Her gaze dropped to my chest, like she was listening for something behind my ribs. Then she looked back up at the windshield. "They never see it coming either." I followed her eyes out to the road. The highway looked the same. Twin lines of dark pavement, snowbanks on either side, the faint suggestion of trees beyond. The stars above, blurred by my own fatigue. The reflective posts ticking by, neat and even. But my stomach turned. The next mile marker should have been 122. I'd been counting without even thinking about it. Instead, the sign my headlights picked up said 119. Again, I frowned. Had I misread the last one? Was I more tired than I realized? I checked the clock. 12:37 a.m. Same time as when I first saw her. I knew it because I remembered the numbers, remembered thinking how late it was for someone to be walking that stretch. I glanced at the dash. The trip odometer hadn't ticked over in several minutes, like we'd been rolling in place. Outside, the world felt narrower, like the headlights were pushing against something solid instead of empty air. My steering wheel vibration was barely there now, muffled and distant. The engine sounded afar away. Something's wrong with the road, I muttered, mostly to myself. She exhaled a long, slow breath. The cloud that came out of her mouth poured across the dash and over my hands like fog, so cold it made my knuckles ache. "It's not the road," she said. "It's the part that takes you. Sometimes it misses. Sometimes it doesn't." I swallowed. My tongue felt thick. "What happened to you?" I asked, voice low. She turned back to the windshield, as if watching something I couldn't see. "I kept walking," she said. "I thought I could make it to the next light. They found me standing. I don't remember lying down." A shiver ran through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. "You're saying you're—" She cut me off. "You're not supposed to stop. When you stop, it notices you." Right then, the CB crackled again, louder this time. A man's voice I'd never heard before, close and crystal clear, like he was sitting in the sleeper. "Southbound unit past 119. Do not stop. Repeat, do not stop. Keep moving." I grabbed the mic, heart hammering. "This is southbound reefer, I copy." "Who is this?" Static. Then, faintly, under the hiss, a sound like wind moving through tall trees, or breath passing through an empty hallway. The woman's hand moved. Her fingers brushed the edge of the seat, leaving a thin smear of frost where her skin touched the vinyl. "You should have kept driving," she said again, barely audible. I blinked. Her seat was empty. No torn jacket, no frozen hair, no hollow-eyed stare, just the indent where someone had been sitting moments before, and a scattering of ice crystals melting on the vinyl, leaving tiny wet spots that soaked into the material. The temperature in the cab surged back up so fast my ears rang. The heater's warm air hit my face like a wave. My breath stopped coming out in visible puffs. I checked the mirror on pure instinct, half expecting to see her standing on the step, clinging to the side of the cab. Nothing, just my own trailer lights glowing red in the dark. Ahead, the next mile marker flashed by. The clock read 12:49 a.m. Time had moved again. The wheel vibration was back, full and solid. The engine sounded normal. The world slipped back into place like a film reel that had skipped and then caught. I drove another 10 miles before I trusted myself to pull into a small turnout and stop. When I did, my legs were jelly. I sat there, engine idling, listening to the tick of cooling metal and the soft hum of the reefer. In the morning, at a ranger station down the line, I mentioned seeing someone out on the road in that stretch, just in case. The ranger, a tired-looking guy with a beard and a coffee mug that said, "Winter is coming," nodded slowly when I told him roughly where. "A woman?" he asked. "Light jacket, no hat? Kinda short." "That's her," I said, stomach sinking. "You know her?" He scratched his jaw. "She died out there last year. Hypothermia. They found her standing upright in a snowdrift, like she'd frozen mid-step. We still get calls about her. People swear they see her walking the shoulder." He hesitated. "A couple drivers swear they picked her up." I didn't tell him about the frost on the seat. I still run that route sometimes. Not as often, and never if I can help it in deep winter. But trucking isn't about what you want. It's about what the load needs. And every time I pass mile marker 119 on a cold, clear night, I keep my eyes locked straight ahead. I don't look at the shoulder. I don't slow down. If I feel the temperature dip, I turn the heat up and pretend it's in my head. Because in my peripheral vision, just at the edge of the headlight wash, I still see her sometimes. A small shape in a torn jacket, hair stiff with frost, hand half raised. waiting for someone to be kind enough to stop. I'm done being that someone. But I'll tell you this, on the coldest nights, when the cab is dark and the only light is from the dash, I can still see a faint pattern on the passenger seat, like frost that never quite melted. And every time the heater kicks on and the vents blow warm air across the cab, I swear I see a thin cloud of breath on the inside of the windshield, coming from a place where no one's sitting. I don't tell this story to just anyone. Most people hear ghost truck, and they either laugh or start pitching movie ideas. The ones who've actually driven nights through the mountains, they don't laugh as fast. They've all seen something they can't fully explain. This is mine. Name's Dale. Been running long haul for a little over 22 years now. Mostly refrigerated and dry van, cross country. I'm not a nervous guy, not a storyteller by trade. I log my hours, chase my miles, and try to make it home often enough that my wife still recognizes me. The night this happened, I was hauling frozen chicken in a white Freightliner Cascadia, 53-foot reefer behind me, grossing right around $78,000. Route was westbound through a mountain pass they call Grey Wolf Summit. 2 lanes, no median, guardrail on the bad side and air beyond that. Late January, a little after 3 in the morning. I remember the time because my delivery window was tight. 10 a.m. drop at a distribution center 3 states over. I'd planned my hours down to the minute. Cat naps at the right truck stops. Fuel where it was cheap. Hit Grey Wolf in the dead of night when traffic was mostly gone. The weather going up wasn't terrible. Cold, sure, mid-20s, light drizzle that froze on the wipers, but I've seen worse. The kind of night where the road feels like it's holding its breath, waiting to see who messes up first. CB chatter had been steady earlier. A couple of tankers talking about a trailer that went off the cliff up there years back, how they still slow down out of habit. Some guys live for that kind of horror story banter at 2 a.m. I usually tune it out, but one line stuck with me. "Watch that westbound grade past mile 73, a gravelly voice said. That's where he lost it. Ice takes you sideways there. I didn't catch the call sign, didn't think much of it at the time. By the time I hit the east side of the climb, most of the chatter had died off. Just the occasional key up, a little static, nothing clear. The drizzle turned to a fine mist, then thickened. My wipers went from an easy rhythm to that frantic, rubbery squeal. Fog rolled in fast. Not the patchy kind that comes and goes. This was a wall. 1 minute I could see half a mile of reflective paint stretching ahead. The next, my world shrank to the reach of my low beams, and even that felt like it was being swallowed, inch by inch. I dropped my speed. 40, 35, 30. The road up there has those little rumble strips along the center and the edge. The sound of them, thrum, 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 became my safety net. I drift a few inches, feel the vibration through the wheel and my boots, correct, and ease back into the lane. No headlights behind me, none in front, just me, 78,000 pounds of metal and frozen poultry, climbing into a cloud. Inside the cab, the air was warm and dry, heater on low. A faint smell of coffee from the half-empty thermos in the cup holder. Diesel soaked into the floor mats, and that plasticky scent from the reefer controls buzzing away behind my seat. Outside, it was nothing, just blank white and the suggestion of a world beyond it. The CB crackled once, twice, a burst of static, then what sounded like someone keying up and letting go without speaking. I reached for the mic out of habit, then thought better of it. Both hands on the wheel felt safer. I remember glancing at the mile marker as it loomed out of the fog. Grey Wolf's worst stretch was supposed to be around 73, if that old voice on the radio was to be believed. I told myself I'd drop another 5 miles per hour, take it slow, and be over the summit before the sun even thought about waking up. I never saw the fog get thicker. There wasn't a line where it suddenly changed. It was more like the light just stopped working right. My beams hit something and bounced back, making the mist glow instead of cutting through. Felt like driving inside a light bulb. My steering wheel vibration faded a notch, like the tires were less connected to the road. Not sliding, not yet, just lighter. The way it feels on black ice right before you're sure it's black ice. That's when I saw the lights. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Two pinpricks of brightness somewhere ahead in all that white, barely visible. A second later, they blossomed into full headlights, big round ones, high up, not like the modern LED bars. Old-school yellow halogens, glaring through the fog. They were dead ahead. I've been in close calls. I know what your body does. Your heart drops, your stomach climbs into your throat. Time stretches. I instinctively lifted off the throttle, went for the brake. Gently, just enough to feel resistance, and started to move my foot to the horn. Then the fog shifted, and my headlights caught the rest of it. An 18-wheeler, big conventional cab, long hood, square grille. Trailer swung across the road at an angle, blocking both lanes. Jackknifed. The tractor was canted toward my lane, driver's side facing me. Like someone had tried to correct a slide and overdid it. The trailer stretched from guardrail to ditch, a full white wall with a company logo I didn't recognize, cut in half by my beams. I didn't think. There wasn't time. I hit the brakes harder, careful as I dared in that weather, feeling my trailer shove against me. The anti-lock system chattered under my foot. I could feel the whole rig going light, wanting to slide. My heart was going like a jackhammer. In that instant, I was sure I was about to plow straight into them. The distance closed fast, 90 feet, 60, 40, those headlights swelling in my windshield until it felt like they were going to climb into the cab with me. There was no shoulder to take. No gap. No room. I braced. And then, nothing. No impact. No crunch of metal. No explosion of glass. The wheel didn't jerk in my hands. The seat belt didn't bite into my chest. For a second, all sensation dropped out. No vibration in the wheel. No engine rumble. Just a weightless feeling. Like the entire rig had slipped off the road and was floating in cold, dead air. The lights filled my windshield, too bright to look at, washing everything in a blinding yellow white. The cab felt colder, the breath in my chest freezing solid. Then the lights passed through me. That's the only way I can describe it. They didn't move aside. I didn't swerve around them. They stayed right there, dead center, and I drove through them. The tractor, the trailer, all of it. For a heartbeat, the world went gray. Sound dulled like cotton had been stuffed in my ears. The smell of ozone hit me, sharp and metallic, like the air inside a transformer station. My skin crawled under my jacket. Then my wheels grabbed something solid again. The engine roar snapped back to normal volume. The wheel came alive under my hands. The road ahead was empty. No truck, no trailer, no taillights, just fog and the faint ghost of my own beams reflecting off it. I realized I was still stomping the brake and eased off, riding the line between control and a slide. The rig straightened. My heart somehow kept beating. I checked my mirrors. Nothing behind me, nothing on the shoulder. No sign I'd passed anything at all. I rolled to the next turnout, just a widened patch near the inside of a bend, and eased the truck over, air brakes hissing as she came to a stop. My hands were shaking so badly I had to keep them on the wheel for a few seconds just to let them settle. I sat there in the dim wash of the dash lights, wipers squealing, engine idling low. The fog pressed up against the windows like dirty glass. Inside the cab, the air smelled burned, like someone had arc welded right behind my head. The CB crackled to life. Any westbound units on Grey Wolf, you copy? Got reports again at 73. Jackknife sighting. The voice sounded bored. Routine. I grabbed the mic, cleared my throat. This is Cascadia westbound, just past 73. I saw it. Full rig across both lanes. But it wasn't solid. I went right through it. There was a pause. A long one. I could hear faint background noise, paper shuffling, a cough. Then another voice cut in. Older. Lower. You make contact? He asked. No, I swallowed. That's what I'm trying to tell you. There was nothing thereafter. No debris. No tire tracks. It just. Static swallowed me mid-sentence. The radio shrieked with it for a few seconds. A high, keening pitch that made my teeth ache. Then cut off completely. The channel went dead. Not just quiet, dead. No hiss, no background hum. I set the mic down slowly. My dash cam had been running the whole time. Company policy. Every mile, every minute, recorded in case someone decided to cut me off and try their luck with a lawsuit. Hands still trembling, I leaned over, popped the little SD card out of its slot, and stared at it. Piece of plastic and metal not much bigger than a fingernail. Proof, I told myself. Whatever that was, it'll be on here. At the next real truck stop, 30 miles down the west side, I parked under the bright white glare of the lot lights, killed the engine, and took the card inside. The fluorescent bulbs buzzed overhead, making everything look a little sick. The night manager let me use the back office computer. I slotted the card in, pulled up the footage, and scrolled to the timestamp. 3:12 a.m. Fog. Road. My headlights cutting through the mist like always. Speedometer at 33. The wheel steady in frame. Then the section where the lights should have appeared. Instead, the video went to snow. Not fog. Not a blurred image. Static. Old-school TV snow. Black and white dots hissing across the screen. For exactly 12 seconds. When the picture came back, the road was empty. No truck. No headlights. Just me, breathing a little harder than usual, hands a little tighter on the wheel. The 12 seconds where those lights filled my world didn't exist. The manager leaned over my shoulder, frowning. Camera glitch, he said. Happens sometimes. Not like that, I replied. Not at the exact moment. He raised his hands. Hey man, I just run the register. Later, sitting at the counter with bad coffee and a worse sandwich, I mentioned it to an older driver a couple stools down. Guy had that permanent road crease look around his eyes, the kind you only get after a few million miles. Grey Wolf? He asked. Westbound, just before the 73 sign? Yeah. He nodded slowly. That's where Jimbo died. Years back. Tanker lost it on black ice. Jackknife it. Went over the side. Took half the guardrail with him. He stirred his coffee. They say you still see him some nights. Rig across the road. Lights full blast. Only they're long enough to scare the hell out of you. I swallowed. Why? He shrugged. Maybe he's trying to warn folks. Maybe that's the last thing he remembers doing. Maybe the road just replays certain moments. He looked at me. You're not the first to say you went right through him. I didn't sleep that day. I ran on caffeine and stubbornness, made my drop, picked up the next load, kept moving. That's what you do. Out here, you keep moving. But every time I see fog roll in heavy on a mountain grade now, my hands get a little slick on the wheel. I watch the white thickness swallow the world, and I brace myself for those old yellow lights to bloom out of nowhere, filling my windshield, daring me to blink. And when the CB crackles near mile marker 73 and some bored voice says, "Got reports again of a jackknife sighting," I turn the volume down, just a notch, and keep my eyes straight ahead, because I know what's out there. And I know that one night, when the fog's just right and the air smells like burned metal, I'll see that rig again, blocking both lanes, headlights burning like twin suns. And I'll have to find out if I still pass through. I've chained up in worse places. That's what I told myself, anyway. Name's Ron. I've been running long haul out of the Midwest for about 19 years now. Mostly refrigerated, sometimes dry van, couple years on flatbed when I was younger and dumber. If there's a way across the Rockies in winter, I've probably done it at 3 in the morning with a half-empty thermos and a dispatcher texting me like the weather reports don't apply to frozen meat. This was on a route I'd taken a dozen times. Westbound across a mountain corridor the locals call Blackwater Pass. 2 lanes, tight curves, steep grades, a whole lot of nothing on either side. There's a wide pull-off about halfway up. Used to be a scenic overlook in the summer. In winter, it's just a flat sheet of ice with a couple of rusted chain-up signs leaning at funny angles. I was in a white Volvo VNL with a 53-foot reefer, 74,000 pounds gross. Frozen goods in the box, 24-hour delivery window. It was late January. Temperature on the dash said -9 degrees Fahrenheit. Dropping. A little after 2 a.m. Snow had stopped, but everything was frozen in that hard, quiet way. No falling flakes, no wind. Just ice on the road and a sky that looked like it had been drained of color. Muted stars behind thin cloud, moon just a smudge. The CB was mostly dead. A couple of guys earlier talking about chain laws, someone griping about a blown scale ticket an hour back. Static after that. My world shrank down to the dashboard glow, the hum of the engine, and the faint rattle of coffee in the cup holder. I started losing traction halfway up the grade. Nothing dramatic, just that subtle, ugly feeling where you give it a little throttle and the RPM climbs but your speed doesn't. Steering wheel vibration changes, gets a little looser, like the tires are skating instead of gripping. I eased off, let her coast, and made the call. Chain time. The pull-off appeared out of the dark on my right like a memory, wide, flat, white. I signaled even though there wasn't another set of headlights for miles, eased over, and felt the truck bump onto rough ice. The whole rig shuddered and then settled. Air brakes sighed. Reefer hummed on behind me. I sat there a minute, looking out at the world. The pull-off wasn't asphalt under snow. It was solid ice. You could see it in the way the headlights hit the surface, a dull, bluish sheen under the white. In summer, the rock wall on the far side seeped meltwater that turned this spot into a shallow pond. In winter, it froze into a flat, glassy plate. I chained here before. Everyone had. It was on the map as a chain-up area, ranger sign and everything. Nobody thought twice about it. I killed the engine but left the auxiliary power on. Cab lights dimmed. The silence that followed was loud. No engine rumble. No fan noise. Just the faint tick of cooling metal and my own breath. I pulled on my heavy gloves, zipped my jacket up to my chin, grabbed the bag of iron from the side box, and stepped out into the cold. The air hit me like a wall. Smelled like metallic glass. Sharp, dry, and so clean it hurt. My nostrils stuck together on the first inhale. Every exhale came out as a thick white cloud that hung around my face before it drifted away. My boots crunched on the snow, then slid a fraction on the ice beneath. The pull-off stretched out under the truck, maybe 20-30 yards of frozen sheet before it met the dark line of the rock wall. Under my headlights, the ice had that layered look, cloudy in some spots, clear in others. You could see trapped air bubbles and long, frozen cracks running like veins. I ducked between the drives, knees complaining, chain bag digging into my side. The underside of the trailer loomed above me, a dark ceiling. The world out there became a narrow slice. Drives, fender, edge of the ice. Everything else was shadow and dim reflected light. I dropped to a crouch, the cold biting through my jeans in seconds, and started wrestling the first set of chains around the tire. My gloves squeaked against the frozen rubber. The steel links rattled, loud in the quiet. For a while, it was just work. Familiar motions, muscle memory. Hook this, drag that, spin the wheel a few inches to settle it. My breath puffed out in front of me and froze on the exposed metal, leaving a thin white crust. That's when I heard it, knocking. At first I thought it was something shifting in the trailer. Load settling, pallets nudging each other as the cold bit down. It's common with frozen goods. You hear thuds, creaks, little pops from the box all the time. But this didn't sound like that. It was closer, sharper. A hollow, resonant sound, like knuckles on a tabletop. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Rhythmic, precise, desperate. I froze, half-bent, chain hanging from my hands. My first thought was that someone had pulled in behind me and I hadn't noticed. A ranger, another driver, somebody messing around. I twisted my head, looking under the trailer toward the highway. Empty. Just the faint line of the guardrail and the suggestion of the road beyond, washed in my own red marker lights. The knocking came again. 3 sharp raps. From below me, it sounded like it was coming up through the soles of my boots. I looked down. The ice just beyond the shadow of the truck was clearer there. Not perfectly, not like glass, but clear enough that the headlight beam reached down through a few inches. I could see shapes under it, rocks, maybe, or uneven ground from when it had been a pond. The knocks vibrated against my toes this time, a faint tremor. It felt like being in an upstairs apartment when someone's banging on the ceiling from below. I set the chain down slowly and shuffled a bit closer, knees clicking, the cold making everything stiff. My breath fogged the air in front of my face, then curled down, settling like mist on the ice. "Hello," I said, feeling stupid even as the word left my mouth. The ice answered with 3 sharp knocks, faster this time. The sound had a hollow ring to it, like there was space down there. Not solid earth. Not a couple feet of frozen mud. I told myself it had to be expansion. Ice moves when it freezes and thaws. Cracks, shifts, groans. I'd heard it on lakes before. Long, deep booms that sound like distant thunder. But this wasn't that. This was deliberate. I leaned in a little more, squinting past my own reflection in the ice. The surface was cloudy, but there were pockets of clarity. Bubbles suspended mid-rise. Hairline fractures. Underneath it looked dark. Uncomfortably dark. The knocks came again, hard enough now that I felt the vibration up through my shins. 3, 3, 3, like someone pounding on the underside of a door. The skin on the back of my neck prickled. The world around me felt wrong suddenly. Too quiet, like the mountain had sucked in its breath and was holding it. I took another step, boots sliding a little. I put my palm flat on the ice without thinking. Cold knifed up into my hand, so intense it almost felt hot for a second. The surface was slick and hard, tiny crystals biting into my skin through the thin leather of the glove. There was something under there. Not a shape I could make out clearly. Not at first. Just movement. A darker patch in the dark, shifting beneath the ice like a shadow waving back and forth. My breath fogged the surface again. I wiped it away with my sleeve. What I saw next still wakes me up sometimes. A face, pressed right up against the underside of the ice, distorted by water and thickness and angle. Pale, blurred features, wide, dark eyes staring straight up. Mouth open in a perfect, silent O. The eyes were wrong. Too dark. No whites I could see, just 2 black orbs surrounded by swollen skin. The nose looked pushed flat. Fingers splayed against the ice on either side, leaving faint impressions in whatever frost was clinging under there. The knocking wasn't from far away. It was those hands, hitting the ice, over and over, 3 and 3 and 3. My body reacted before my brain did. I jerked back so hard I slipped, one boot shooting out. My knee slammed into the ice, sending a shock of pain up my leg. The chain clattered beside me, metal screaming in the quiet. Under the ice, the face moved. The eyes seemed to track me as I scrambled backward on all fours. The mouth stretched wider, like a scream I couldn't hear. Hair fanned out around the head, dark strands drifting in slow motion. And then, as my weight shifted and my boot dug in, I heard it. A crack, thin at first. A high, delicate sound, like a wine glass being scratched. A white line spidered away from under my feet, racing out across the pull-off. For a heartbeat, the ice felt soft. Not water, not yet, but not as solid as it had been. Like there was too much emptiness below it. I got up and ran. My boots slid, caught, slid again. I half stumbled, half sprinted back to the truck, chain forgotten where it lay. My breath tore out of me in harsh gasps. The night air tasted like metal and panic. I yanked the driver's door open, hauled myself into the cab, and slammed it shut. My hands shook so badly I fumbled the key in the ignition. When the engine roared back to life, it was the sweetest, loudest sound I'd ever heard. I didn't bother with perfect form pulling out. I eased off the brakes and rolled forward, feeling the tires bite, slip, then catch. The trailer tugged behind me, still unchained, but I didn't care. I kept it slow, careful, but I did not stop. In my side mirror, as I eased back onto the highway, I caught one last glimpse of the pull-off. Just a flat, white sheet of ice under the beam of my taillights. No cracks, no face, no shape moving beneath. I drove in silence for a long time after that. No radio, no CB, just the sound of the engine and the whisper of rubber on frozen road. The next afternoon, on my way back east empty, I stopped at the ranger station at the base of the pass. Figured if there was someone messing around up there, they'd want to know. The ranger on duty was a woman in her 50s, tired eyes, coffee gone lukewarm on the desk. I told her I'd heard knocking out on the pull-off, that it sounded like someone under the ice. She listened, expression unreadable. "That pond?" she asked when I pointed it out on the map. "Goes down deep, old quarry beneath it, over 300 feet where it's not silted in. Freezes solid on top every winter." "Could someone fall in?" I asked. "Get trapped under?" She shook her head. "Not this year. No reports. No accidents on that pull-off in at least a decade. And nothing could survive under that ice. Not in that depth. Not this long." She must have seen something in my face, because her tone softened. "Probably just the ice shifting," she said. "Plays tricks on your ears. You guys are tired, alone, keyed up. Mountains do that to people." I nodded. I didn't argue. But here's what I didn't tell her. Ice shifting doesn't have fingers. It doesn't have eyes that follow you. It doesn't press its face up to the underside like it's trying to remember what breathing felt like. I still chain up when I have to. You don't last long out here if you let fear make your decisions. But I don't chain there anymore. I'll go further up or further down, or I'll crawl at 15 miles an hour until I find bare ground. And every winter, once the temperature drops and the lakes freeze over, I start to hear things again when the world goes quiet. Faint, hollow knocking. 3, 3, 3. Sometimes it's when I'm parked on a concrete pad at a truck stop, snow packed around the tires. Sometimes it's when I'm lying in my bunk and the reefer has just cycled off, and the silence feels like a held breath. I tell myself it's the trailer settling, the wind, the building, anything but what I saw under that ice. But I'll be honest with you, on the coldest nights, when the stars look muted and the heater can't quite chase the chill out of the cab, I can feel something deep below my boots, like a sound traveling up through stone and water and frozen layers. Knocking, still waiting for someone to come back and listen. I've slept in some questionable places in this line of work. Gravel lots behind slaughterhouses, empty fairgrounds in off-season, a Walmart parking lot in a town so small they didn't even bother locking the doors at night. When you run long haul as long as I have, you learn to be grateful for any flat patch of ground and a bathroom that sort of works. But there's one place I won't stop again. Name's Hank. I've been driving almost 3 decades now, mostly reefer, some dry van, a few years on tanker back when rates made it worth the ulcers. I don't scare easy, and I don't tell stories for attention. I'm telling you this because I still can't file it under tired brain or bad lighting. This run was late November, shoulder season between fall and real winter. I had a full 53-foot refrigerated trailer loaded with dairy headed north. Tight schedule, drop window 7 a.m., no excuses. I was in a Kenworth W900, long hood, deep rumble, the kind of rig old-timers still nod at when you fuel up. The weather turned worse than they'd forecast. They'd called it light freezing drizzle. By midnight, it was black ice with fog low enough to kiss the chrome. My original route got shut down by a multi-vehicle pileup. DOT had the interstate blocked and detouring everyone onto a state highway I didn't know well. 2 lanes, nowhere to pass. Dense forest pressing in on both sides. No streetlights, no towns worth mentioning on the map. Just a few named junctions and a river I never saw but knew was there. CB chatter was thin. A couple of us griped about the detour. Another guy mentioned he was parking up because his eyelids felt like sandpaper. After that, just static and an occasional burst of garbled talk too far away to matter. I remember the dashboard clock glowing 1:42 a.m. when the GPS lost its mind. The little screen froze, recalculated, then showed my icon drifting off the highlighted route, even though I knew I hadn't missed a turn. Rerouting? It chirped in that fake sweet voice, then dumped me onto a gray background like the road had ceased to exist. Cell signal dropped at the same time. No bars. Just like that. Alone. The fog thickened until my world shrank to the reach of my low beams and a suggestion of trees sliding by in silver-gray smears. The heater hummed, blowing that dry, recycled warmth at my legs. The cab smelled like old coffee, dust, and the faint sourness of a half-eaten sandwich in the trash bag behind my seat. My hands felt good on the wheel, solid vibration, tires still telling me I had grip. My body wanted sleep. You know that feeling. Eyes grainy, neck stiff, the road starting to blur into one long, gray ribbon. I told myself I'd pull off as soon as I found a safe place. Problem was, this road didn't believe in safe places. Just ditches and trees. Then I saw the light. At first, I thought it was another rig ahead of me, tucked into some wide turnout. A warm orange glow off to the right, just beyond the tree line. Not white like a headlamp or blue like LEDs, soft, steady orange, like an old tungsten bulb or a wood stove. I slowed a little, squinting through the fog. The road curved and the light shifted into view properly. It wasn't a pull-off. It was a cabin. Small, wooden, looked like something out of a hunter's catalog. One story, peaked roof capped with snow, a crooked metal chimney. The windows on the front glowed with that orange-yellow warmth that feels like hands held out to a fire. The fog around it looked thinner somehow, like the light pushed it back. In my mirrors, the highway behind me was just darkness. Ahead, more of the same. The idea of shutting down for a few hours in my sleeper suddenly seemed less appealing than maybe knocking on a door, asking if I could park by their drive, buy some hot coffee off them. You spend enough nights alone on the road, you start craving other human presences like nicotine. I rolled off the throttle and eased onto a narrow dirt track that split from the highway and led toward the cabin. The truck shuddered over frozen ruts, tires crunching on gravel and ice. My headlights washed over bare trees and a sagging wooden fence before I angled the rig onto what passed for a crude turnaround. Up close, the cabin looked ordinary. Rough-cut boards darkened with age, patches on the roof, the glow from inside flickering gently like firelight. Smoke should have been coming from the chimney, but the top was dark against the sky. I set the brakes, air hissed, the truck settled. Killed my headlights but left the marker lights on. The sudden drop in light outside made the cabin windows seem even brighter. The cab felt too quiet with the engine off. Just the faint tick of metal cooling and the low, distant buzz of the reefer unit cycling. I pulled on my jacket, grabbed my flashlight, and opened the door. Cold punched into the cab, sharp enough to make my eyes water. It smelled like wet bark and iron, metallic, clean, with that faint ozone tinge you get right before a storm. My boots hit frozen dirt with a dull crunch. Gravel shifted underfoot. The night was thick. Without my headlights, the forest around us was just a wall of dark shapes. The stars were muted behind thin cloud. The only real light came from the cabin. Those two front windows burning soft and orange, promising heat. I started toward it, breath fogging, flashlight beam bouncing ahead of me. Halfway to the door, the light changed. Not went out. Not yet. It flickered. The steady warm glow stuttered, brightening and dimming in sharp, uneven pulses. Shadows jumped inside, long, stretched shapes sliding across the curtains like someone was pacing back and forth. Fast. I stopped. The hair on my arms prickled under my jacket. Goosebumps raced across my scalp in a wave. "Hello," I called, loud enough to carry but not loud enough to sound like I was yelling at my own nerves. "Truck driver here. Got detoured off the main road, just looking for a safe spot to park. You folks all right in there?" The light answered me by dimming to almost nothing, then flaring back so hard the window panes glared. Felt wrong. Not like a log shifting in a fire. It reminded me of a light bulb about to blow. Too bright, too fast, like it was drawing more power than it should. Then everything went black. Not the night, not the woods, just the cabin. Both windows went from orange to dead dark in the span of a breath. Whatever warmth I thought I'd felt on my face vanished. The world around me felt suddenly colder, like it had dropped 10 degrees in a second. I stood there listening. No voices, no footsteps, no dog barking, just the distant, muffled hum of my reefer and the wind threading through the trees in a thin, whispering sound. Common sense said turn around, get back in the truck, pretend I'd never seen it. Curiosity overruled common sense by just enough. I went up the 3 wooden steps to the porch. They creaked under my weight, the wood dry and stubborn. My flashlight beam picked out peeling paint on the door, a rusty handle, the faint outline of boot scuffs across the boards. I knocked. The sound was dull, flat, like the wood was thicker than it looked. My knuckles stung through the glove. Nothing. I knocked again. "Hello? Everything okay?" Lights were flickering. "You need help?" The silence pressed back. I tried the handle. turned without resistance. The door swung inward with a soft sigh, carrying a breath of air that smelled like old ash, cold wood, and time. My flashlight beam cut into the dark. The cabin was one room, small, simple. A wood stove sat against the far wall, iron door shut, a pile of logs stacked beside it, a rickety table and two mismatched chairs, a narrow bed with a wool blanket folded tight, shelves with canned goods and tools. No electricity that I could see, no outlets, no wiring, no lamps. Just a single metal hook on the ceiling where a lantern might have hung once. The embers in the stove were long dead. Nothing but gray ash and cold black chunks of wood sat behind the grate. When I stepped closer and held my hand near, there wasn't the faintest hint of heat. Felt like it hadn't burned in days. But the thing that made my mouth go dry was the floor. The cabin's floorboards were scuffed with footprints. One set, mostly. Boots, smallish, maybe a woman's or a teenager's. The tracks came from the door, traced a path to the stove, over to the table, back again, like someone pacing a worn route in a small life. Then they stopped. Not at the bed, not at the door, not near a dropped coat or an open trapdoor. They just ended. 6, 7 prints, each one a little fainter, as if the snow or mud had dried off the soles. And then nothing. Bare boards. No smudge of a heel, no half-print. The pacing ended in the middle of the room, as if the person had walked to that exact spot and ceased to exist. I shone my light over the ceiling, half expecting a hatch. Nothing. Just wood, old and stained. No attic. No obvious way out except the door I'd come through and the 2 windows. "Hello," I said again, softer now. The cabin answered with a faint creak somewhere in the walls. The sound old wood makes when it remembers a weight that isn't there anymore. The air felt wrong in there. Heavy. Stale in a way that didn't match a room that looked used. Like someone had left and air hadn't realized it should move again. I backed up, flashlight beam never leaving those empty footprints. I don't know why I turned around before I hit the door. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe I just wanted one last look to prove to myself I wasn't missing something obvious. The prints were still there, still ending mid-room like that. I stepped out, pulled the door shut behind me, and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The cold outside hit me again. Sharp, metallic, somehow cleaner than the air inside. I walked back toward the truck, boots crunching on frost. Ahead of me, my rig sat where I'd left it, marker lights glowing dull red and amber through the fog like a ship in low tide. The sight of it calmed me a little, big, grounded, familiar. Halfway there, something made me stop. The light, it was back. Warm orange glow spilling out behind me, bright enough to throw my shadow long and thin across the ground toward the truck. My breath puffed white in front of me. The air on the back of my neck felt warmer now, like standing too close to a space heater. Very, very slowly I turned around. The 2 front windows of the cabin burned with that same inviting light I'd seen from the road. Steady now. No flicker. No violence in it. Just a calm, hearth-like glow. Except this time, there was something in the window. A figure stood framed in the right-hand pane. Not clear. Not detailed. Just a dark silhouette against the orange. A head, shoulders, torso. No features. No color. But it was the posture that got me. Whoever or whatever it stood at an angle that mirrored me almost exactly. Shoulders slightly hunched, head tilted just so. Hands down by its sides, like it was watching itself. For a second, I had the insane thought that I was looking at my own shadow from the wrong side of the glass. That if I raised my arm, it would too. I didn't test that. The air between the cabin and the truck felt thick, charged, like the inside of a running transformer. My skin prickled all over. The smell of ozone hit me again, stronger this time, undercut with the faint sour tang of cold ash. I backed away, never turning my back fully, until my hand found the grab handle on the cab. I climbed up, boots slipping once on the step. My heart hammered so loud it drowned out the creak of the springs. Inside, I slammed the door, locked it, and fired up the engine. The familiar vibration shook the cab, reassuring in its normalcy. The heater roared back to life. I forced myself to look one last time through the side window. The cabin still glowed. The figure was still there. Only now it seemed closer to the glass, like it had taken a half step forward. The outline of the head tilted a fraction more. Watching, I didn't wave. I didn't nod. I put the truck in gear, eased onto the dirt track, and rolled back toward the highway as smooth as my shaking legs would allow. No spinning the tires, no dramatic exit. Just leaving. As my rig turned, the angle shifted. The cabin slid out of my direct line of sight. For a moment, I could have sworn I saw a second shape in the other window. Smaller, hunched, like someone sitting at that table I'd seen. Then the trees swallowed it. The orange glow disappeared behind bare branches and fog, and I was back on the frozen blacktop, my tires humming on the iced-over lane. The GPS came back to life 15 minutes later. Cell signal, too. The road reappeared on the screen like nothing had ever been wrong. At the next fuel stop, I tried to find that cabin on satellite view. Zoomed in on the stretch of highway, traced the bends, followed every little side road. Trees, hills, a dry creek bed. No structure, no clearing, just forest. I've been on that detour twice since, different seasons, different loads. Both times I looked for the little dirt track that split off toward the right. The sagging fence, the telltale glow between the trees. Nothing. But some nights, when the road is empty and the fog starts to rise off the asphalt in long, low fingers, I can see that same orange light in my mirror. Not on the shoulder, not on the dash. Reflected just for a second in the side glass. Like a small cabin with a burning light has fallen into step with my rig, pacing me through the dark. And every time I feel tempted to pull off at some lonely turnoff and kill the engine for a nap, I remember the footprints that stopped in the middle of the room and never continued to the door. I keep driving. I've spent more nights staring into my mirrors than most people spend asleep in their own beds. After a couple million miles, you learn to trust what those mirrors tell you. They're your only eyes on the world behind you. Blind spots, merging idiots, four-wheelers riding your bumper with their brights on. Your mirrors save you over and over. So when my mirrors started lying to me, that's when I knew something was really wrong. Name's Carl. Been running long haul for 21 years now. Mostly Midwest to Northwest Dakotas, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho. I run a white Freightliner Cascadia, 53-foot dry van, company colors, nothing special. My logbooks are clean, my drug tests are boring, and until a few winters ago, I would have told you I'd seen every trick a highway could throw at a driver. This started on I-94 in late January, crossing through North Dakota into Montana. Real winter, not flurries, hard snow, sideways wind, drifts building up in the median like frozen waves. I'd picked up a mixed load, pallets of paper goods, canned food, some boxed hardware, headed for distribution centers out west. Delivery window gave me about 2 days cushion if the weather cooperated. It wasn't cooperating, but dispatch still wanted their ETA updates like the sky was clear. CB chatter all afternoon had been the usual storm talk. Guys calling out whiteout patches, warning about slick overpasses, griping about the DOT closing one stretch and not another. Familiar noise, comforting in its own way. By the time it got fully dark, the traffic had thinned. Most smart folks had parked up early. I pushed on a little longer, habit, stubbornness, and the hope of getting ahead of the worst of it. Out there, under that kind of sky, the stars don't really shine. They smear. Just faint, blurry pinpricks behind low cloud. The world fades down to your headlights, your dash lights, and whatever your imagination fills in between them. That's when I saw the headlights in my mirror. Just a pair at first. Way back. 2 small white dots on the right side mirror where you expect them. Nothing strange. Another truck, maybe a mile or so behind, running the same lonely stretch. I didn't think about it again until I noticed there were more. 3 sets now. 3 pairs of lights, evenly spaced, all hugging my lane. Not gaining, not falling back. Just hanging there at the same distance, like they were tied to my rear bumper with invisible rope. I checked my speed, 62. Reasonable for the conditions. If they'd wanted to pass, they could have taken the left lane. It was open. The snow was patchy, but the plows had made a decent effort. I kept expecting to see one set move out, creep up alongside me. Nobody did. Whenever I slowed a bit, dropping to 55 for a drifted section, they slowed too. The spacing never changed. When I nudged it back up, they matched. Perfectly. Like we were in a convoy that had never been agreed on. "Convoy back there. You boys going around or just admiring my trailer?" I said into the CB, half joking. Static answered. Faint hiss, no voices. I watched them for another 20 miles. Same distance, same formation. 3 sets of white eyes in the dark. Never closer, never farther. Finally, I decided I'd had enough. I was due to shut down anyway. My log was ticking close to 11 hours and the storm was starting to chew on the edges of my nerves. There was a truck stop a few miles ahead. One of those beat-up old ones with bad coffee and good stories. I signaled, eased off the throttle, and took the exit. In the mirror, the 3 sets of lights slowed with me, dropping back just enough to maintain that spacing. "Fine," I muttered. "We'll all park together, and you can tell me why you're tailgating a stranger through a blizzard." I rolled down the ramp, took the tight right into the lot, and threaded my way through rows of sleeping rigs. Found a spot along the far fence, straightened her up, set the brakes. Airside, engine grumbled down. Before I even killed the headlights, I checked the mirrors. Empty. No trucks following me off the exit. No headlights turning in behind me. Just the neon glow from the Fuel Island sign and the ghost of my own beams on other trailers. I sat there, frowning, watching the entrance. Nothing. Maybe they'd stayed on the interstate. Maybe they'd peeled off earlier and the snow had hidden the gap. Maybe my eyes were more tired than I thought. You tell yourself sensible things. You have to. If you let the weirdness in too early, the road will eat you. I slept, delivered, turned around for the backhaul. A week later, different load, same corridor. Same 3 lights. This time I noticed sooner. The snow wasn't as bad, visibility a little better, and the highway was almost empty. I saw the first pair swing into my mirror just after midnight. Seconds later, the second pair appeared. Then the third. All in a neat little string, like beads laid out on black velvet. Again, they matched my speed. If I dropped 5 miles per hour, they dropped 5. If I accelerated to pass a slow car, they accelerated too, but never closed the distance. Westbound, we running a loose convoy or what? I tried again on the CB. Got 3 units behind me. You boys planning to pass sometime tonight? Silence. Then a burst of static that sounded almost like someone keying up and breathing once, sharply, into the mic. I took an exit a little more abruptly than I should have. Signaled late, braked harder than I liked on packed snow. Watched the mirrors. The 3 sets of lights jogged slightly like whoever was driving had been caught off guard. Then followed me down the ramp, same formation. My grip on the wheel tightened. The exit led to a long, empty on-ramp loop that rejoined the highway from the other side. No truck stop this time, no town, just a way on and off. I took it slow, tires humming over the frozen concrete. At the top of the loop, there was a wide shoulder where plows sometimes parked. I eased the rig over, set the brakes, left the engine running. The lights behind me rolled along the curve, getting closer in my mirror. 1, 2, 3. They reached the straight stretch and went out, not dimmed, not turned away, just gone. The highway behind me was a black ribbon, snow swirling in my taillights. No silhouettes, no glows, no reflections off chrome grills. I stared. My heart thumped in my chest, matching the engine's idle with its own rhythm. "Come on," I muttered. "All 3 of you decided to turn off your lights on a live ramp?" I popped the door, climbed down, boots crunching into crusted snow. The air smelled like exhaust and cold metal and that weird, clean nothing that comes with deep winter. My breath poured out in clouds. I walked to the back of my trailer and looked down the ramp. Empty. No trucks. No tire spray. No rumble of engines. The only sound was the wind scraping along the guardrail and the low growl of my own idling Cascadia. The snow on the shoulder and ramp looked untouched. Fresh drift lines, no grooves from recent tires. If anything had followed me in the last 10 minutes, it hadn't left a mark. I felt the goosebumps spread under my jacket, all the way up my arms and across the back of my neck. The lights from my own trailer seemed too bright in that moment, like I was standing on a stage in front of an invisible audience. I got back in the truck and didn't stop again until daylight. For a while, I chalked it up to fatigue. Night driving, storms, stress. You can make yourself see all kinds of things if you stare at snow long enough. Then it happened a third time. Same region, different highway. This time it was US 2, cutting through open nothing with only the occasional town like a missing tooth. It was snowing again. Real snow. Thick flakes that turned my high beams into a white wall. So I dropped to low and let the world shrink. The 3 lights appeared in the mirror like they'd never left. Always 3, never 2, never 4. This time they felt closer. Maybe it was the visibility. Maybe they actually were. Either way, every time I checked the mirror, those 3 pairs of headlights stared back at me, perfectly aligned, perfectly patient. I tried something new. I flipped my hazards on and eased onto the shoulder, letting the rig rumble to a stop with half my trailer still in the lane. Not the safest move, but there wasn't another vehicle for miles and I was done playing. I watched the mirror. The 3 sets of lights slowed. Slower, slower. Then 20, maybe 30 yards behind me, they winked out one after the other. Front, middle, back. Gone. Like someone had pinched candles between gloved fingers. I killed my own headlights and sat in the dark. Turned my interior lights off too. Night wrapped around the truck. No reflected glow. No distant engines. Just wind nudging the cab, making it rock in tiny, unsettling motions. I sat there for so long my toes started to go numb. Nothing. Eventually, I rolled back onto the road and kept going, skin crawling the whole way. I finally told someone about it a couple weeks later, at a little ranger substation off a state highway. I'd stopped in for a weather update. Big system rolling in, power lines already groaning under ice. The ranger on duty was a man in his 60s, heavy shoulders, thick glasses. The type who'd seen too much and been paid too little for it. "You run that corridor a lot?" he asked as he poured coffee into a stained mug. "Too much," I said. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, "You ever get calls about phantom headlights? Trucks that aren't there?" He froze for half a second, just long enough for me to notice. "What kind of trucks?" he asked. "3 of them," I said. "Convoy formation. Show up behind you, match your speed, vanish when you stop. No tire tracks in the snow." He stirred his coffee, eyes on the swirling black. "Used to run a supply convoy out here," he said. "Back in '03. 3 trucks. Winter like this one. They were hauling fuel and food to a reservation further north. Blizzard came in hard. Radios started cutting out. Last anyone heard was they were going to try and push through to the next town." He took a sip. "They never made it. Never found the trucks. No wreckage, no bodies, no spilled cargo. Best guess was they went off somewhere remote, got buried in a drift, and nobody stumbled on them yet." He looked up at me then over the rim of the mug. "You're not the first driver to talk about a 3-rig convoy hanging in their mirrors," he said quietly. "Same story every time. They match you mile for mile, then disappear when you try to meet them. Always in bad weather. Always in that stretch. Ghost trucks," I said, trying to make it sound ridiculous. He didn't smile. "Convoys leave ruts," he said. "Tracks in people's memories. Maybe some runs never finish. Maybe they just keep looking for the right rig to tuck in behind." I left with my jaw tight and my stomach in knots. That was 3 winters ago. I still run that route. Work is work. There are only so many highways to choose from when you pull for the companies I do. I can go months without seeing them. Then one night, the snow will come down sideways, the CB will go quiet, and I'll catch them in the mirror again. 3 pairs of white eyes stacked neatly in a row, far enough back to deny, close enough to feel. If I speed up, they speed up. If I slow, they slow. If I peel off onto an exit ramp, they follow for a while like they're waiting for me to commit. I don't stop to meet them anymore. I keep my wheels rolling, hands steady on the wheel, engine humming under my feet. Let them hang back there in the dark, mile after mile, on whatever road they're really on now. Because the one thing I've learned is this. It's not that they can't catch up. It's that they're choosing not to. And on the nights when the storm is thick and the CB drops to pure static, I can feel them tighten up behind me. 3 ghost trucks falling into perfect formation, like they're waiting for me to fall out of line and join a convoy that never made it home. In an apartment that overlooks a busy road, where there's always some kind of noise, horns, vendors, motorbikes, anything but silence. I chose it on purpose. Silence reminds me of that alley, of the soft sound of footsteps matching mine, of the way someone can memorize your life without you ever noticing. This story starts at a kawa stall. Nothing glamorous, no fancy cafe, just a metal cart on a corner road in Gulberg, dented and stained from years of tea overflow, with mismatched stools, a flickering tube light overhead, and air that always smells like cardamom, frying oil, dust, and faint sewage from a nearby drain. I used to go there a lot after work. It became my little ritual, kawa in a plastic cup, headphones in, watching people instead of going straight home to an empty apartment. The owner knew my usual. The regulars stopped staring after a while. Felt safe. That's where I met him. He was just there one evening, standing a little apart from the cluster of men, hands in his pockets, watching the steam rise from the kettle. White shirt, black jeans, hair a little too neat for that area. He didn't belong, but he didn't look uncomfortable either. He glanced at me once, then again. Not in that gross way some men do, more like he was observing, cataloging. The third time our eyes met, he smiled. Small, polite. That was the first sign something was wrong. He ordered his kawa, then moved closer, leaving an empty stool between us as if he was being respectful. The tube light above us flickered, humming unevenly, making the shadows on his face shift in small, jerky movements. "Long day?" he asked, voice calm, low. "Something like that," I said. I could smell the mix of sugar, spices, exhaust, and the faint sourness of the damp pavement under us. It grounded me. He didn't push. We just talked. Little things. Work, weather, how late the city stays awake. He introduced himself as Saad. Said he worked nearby, late hours, liked to decompress with kawa too. He was polite, quiet, observant. It was almost refreshing. We bumped into each other there a few more times over the next 2 weeks. Always by chance. Always at roughly the same time. Sometimes he'd already be there when I arrived. Other times he'd show up 10 minutes after me. Like clockwork. If I had known what was coming, I think now, I would have asked myself why our coincidences were always so perfectly timed. One night, he asked, "Would it be weird if I officially called this a date instead of bumping into each other?" I hesitated. That small tug in my chest, the one that whispers, "Something's off," pulled again. Then I thought about how long it had been since I'd felt wanted. How kind he'd seemed. How normal it all looked. 2 people, kawa stall, night breeze. "Sure," I said. I ignored every instinct that night. I regret it every day. We sat on the stools, facing the street. The traffic had thinned by then. Stray dogs were picking through torn garbage bags. The metal pole holding the light buzzed. Tiny insects orbiting the bulb. The smell of wet concrete and old oil clung to everything. For a while, it was fine. We talked about music, favorite foods, stupid office politics. He listened more than he spoke, nodding, eyes steady. Not flirty, not aggressive. Then he started finishing my sentences. "You go home after this?" he asked. "Usually. Sometimes I walk the long way around the park first," he said. "You like the trees there. Less noise." My fingers tightened around the warm plastic cup. "I think I mentioned that," I said. "You did," he replied. "I hadn't." He took another sip, eyes on the street. "And then you sleep too late," he added. "Even though you jog at 6 a.m., you should sleep more." I froze. The word jog echoed in my head like a dropped coin rolling across tile. "When you jog at 6 a.m., he repeated almost fondly. "You look half dead, by the way, but dedicated." My mouth went dry. I hadn't posted about jogging. I didn't go dressed in neon clothes or anything. Old t-shirt, loose pants, hair tied back. Who even pays attention at that hour? How do you know that? I asked, trying to sound casual and failing. My voice came out thinner than I wanted. He shrugged, still looking ahead. I've seen you, he said. I live on the way to that little park you cut through. The one with the cracked bench and the broken lamp. My stomach clenched. He shouldn't have known about the broken lamp. You only see that if you're there. Really there. When it's still dim, the sky gray-blue, the air cold and damp, your breath visible. You walk at that time too? I asked. He finally looked at me. His eyes were dark, reflective in the half-light. Sometimes I don't sleep, he said. So I watch the world wake up. Something about the way he said watch made my skin crawl. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself he'd just noticed me once or twice and built a story in his head. Men like to do that, attach meaning to coincidence. I told myself I was fine. I wasn't. He shifted on the stool, the metal scraping against the ground with a sharp screech that made my teeth ache. You should be more careful, though, he said. Jogging like that. Same time every day. Same route. AirPods in. You don't even hear when bikes slow down behind you. The plastic cup bent in my grip. Hot tea sloshing dangerously close to the rim. How do you know that? I asked again, firmer this time. He smiled softly. I pay attention, he said. The stall owner called out to someone. The sizzle of a pan flaring behind us. A truck rumbled past, shaking the ground just enough to be felt in my stool. I tried to breathe normally. My chest felt tight, like someone had looped something around it and started gently, gradually pulling. Those grocery bags on Tuesday look heavy too, he continued lightly, as if he was talking about the weather. From the corner store on the main road. You always forget something and go back in. My heart started pounding so loud I could hear the thud in my ears. He shouldn't have known that. He shouldn't have known that I always forget coriander or milk or something stupid and go back inside. That I struggle with the bags up the stairs, the chipped steps that always smell like damp cloth and fried onions, once then twice. And leaving your window open at night, he added. That's risky. Ground floor. Very trusting. The world narrowed to a tunnel for a second. The noises around us dropped away. The smells, the light, everything. Just that sentence. When you leave your window open at night. I turned to him fully. Sod. I said, my voice shaking now. Seriously, how do you know all of that? He met my eyes without flinching. I notice things, he said again. Patterns. People forget how visible they are when they're alone. A wave of cold went through me from head to toe. The street suddenly felt too empty. The shadows between parked cars seemed deeper. The flickering bulb above us hummed and dimmed slightly, then brightened, making his face shift in strange little jumps. I have to go, I said, standing so quickly the stool wobbled. I just remembered something. He watched me, expression unreadable. Then he smiled. Small, gentle. You always leave around this time, he said, even when you don't remember something. I shoveled cash toward the stall owner with fingers that didn't want to work. My nails scraped the coins. The metal felt cold and greasy. Good night, Huda, he said, like we'd known each other for years. I'll see you. I didn't ask when. I didn't want to know. I walked fast. Too fast. My sandals slapped against the pavement. The sound too loud in my own ears. The air felt thicker, heavy with the smell of dust and smoke and something sour from a nearby trash heap. I didn't look back. I cut through a busier road instead of the quiet shortcut. Cars, rickshaws, headlights, voices, all a chaotic comfort. I checked every few seconds behind me, scanning for his white shirt, his walk, his eyes. Nothing. No sign of him. By the time I reached my building, my throat was dry and my hands were shaking. The stairwell smelled like it always did. Mildew, old paint, faint detergent. The tube light on the first landing flickered, buzzing. Inside my flat, it was too quiet. I locked the door. Once, twice, 3 times. The bolts clanged louder than usual, echoing in the small space. My bedroom window was closed. I'm grateful for that detail. I don't know why I'd closed it that day. Maybe there'd been a storm warning. Maybe I just wanted to keep the dust out. But the latch was down, the metal cool and solid under my fingertips when I checked. I still pulled the curtain aside and stared out. The small patch of earth right under my window was usually just dirt and random trash. Crushed packets, cigarette butts, an old plastic bottle. That night, the street lamp nearby cast enough light for me to see clearly. There were footprints. 2 clearly defined prints in the damp soil near the wall. Shoe prints, not bare feet. Fresh. The edges still crisp, not softened by wind or time. One slightly deeper than the other, like whoever stood there had leaned closer to the window. To my window, my chest seized. The glass reflected my own wide eyes back at me, superimposed over the dark outside. For a second, it looked like I was staring at myself from the other side. I stepped back fast, bumping into the corner of my bed. Pain shot up my hip, grounding me just enough to move. I checked the lock on the window twice, then dragged my old wooden dresser. Heavy, creaking, smelling like varnish and dust. Right in front of it. The effort made my arms shake, breath coming in short, ragged bursts. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, every muscle tense, listening. To the hum of the fridge, to the occasional car outside, to the tiny clicks and creaks of an old building settling into the night. And over all of it, in my head, his voice. You jog at 6 a.m. You buy groceries on Tuesday. You leave your window open at night. The next morning, when my alarm went off at 5:45, that familiar little chirp that used to mean, time to take care of yourself. I stared at the ceiling. I didn't move. I didn't put my shoes on. I didn't jog. I haven't jogged since. I stopped going to the kawa stall, changed my route to work, stopped shopping at that corner store, ordered groceries online, even when it cost more. I moved to a higher floor as soon as I could, paying extra for the illusion of safety. I told a friend part of the story. She told me to go to the police. What was I supposed to say? A man I met for kawa knew my routine too well, and someone stood under my window? They would have said I was lucky nothing happened. They would have told me to be more careful. So I became more careful. Obsessively so. I change my timings now. Never the same route twice in a week. I vary the days I shop. I sleep with the windows locked, the curtains drawn, something heavy pushed in front of them if I can. I avoid patterns like they're poison. But sometimes early in the morning, when the sky is that specific pale gray and the city hasn't fully woken up, I still feel it. That sensation, like someone is out there in the half-light cataloging, matching, timing. When you jog at 6 a.m. Except now I don't. And that scares me in a different way. That one man, one night, took something as simple as running in the morning and ruined it completely. So if you think no one is watching your routine, if you think you're just a face in the crowd, remember this. Someone like him doesn't need to talk to you to know you. He just needs to pay attention. And by the time you realize how much he's seen, you might already find his presence written into the dirt beneath your bedroom window. I've trusted my GPS more than I've trusted most people. You kind of have to these days. Routes change, detours pop up, construction closes exits you've used your whole career. That little screen has gotten me out of more jams than I can count. That night, it almost put me somewhere I wouldn't have come back from. Name's Leon. I've been in a truck for 24 years, mostly Midwest and mountain states, some Canada when the money's right. I was in a blue Kenworth T680 this time, hauling a 53-foot dry van, mixed freight. Light load, maybe 60,000 gross, nothing crazy. Winter. Late January. Northern state I'd rather not name, partly because I still run through there, partly because I don't like giving that road more attention than it already has. I'd started the day on decent interstate. 4 lanes, plowed, salted, just cold. By the time midnight rolled around, I was hours behind schedule. A jackknifed tanker had shut down the main highway. DOT rerouted everyone with a half-baked detour that looked like someone had drawn it with their elbow. My GPS pinged happily when I took the required exit. Continue on route, that synthetic voice said, like we weren't about to leave the world and its rules behind. The detour turned into a state highway, then into a county road. 2 lanes, no median, trees pressing close. Snowbanks climbed up on either side, dirty and high, narrowing everything down to a tunnel. Above, the sky was a flat, starless gray. No moon, just reflected light from my own beams bouncing off the snow. The CB was almost silent. Earlier in the evening, there'd been plenty of griping about the tanker wreck, guys warning each other about black ice and cops hiding in dark medians. Out here, there was just static and the occasional click of someone keying up and deciding not to talk. Inside the cab, the heater pushed out dry warmth. It smelled like dust, old coffee, and that faint hot plastic scent you get from electronics that have been on too long. My hands were steady on the wheel, feeling the familiar vibration from the road. Tires still had good bite. Speedometer hovered at 48, sometimes 50 when the surface looked clean enough. The GPS chirped. In 1.2 miles, turn right. I frowned. The county road I was on ran pretty straight through a whole stretch of nothing, far as I remembered from the map. I hadn't seen any major intersections. I slowed a little, eyes scanning ahead. Sure enough, a side road appeared on the right, barely visible until my headlights caught the reflective sign. No route maintenance beyond this point. Use at own risk. The GPS arrow blinked cheerfully, urging me onto it. I actually said out loud, "You've got to be kidding me." Logbook said I was creeping up on my driving limit. I'd already burned time crawling through the earlier mess. The alternative was to turn around, try to find another way, except the last good junction was 20 miles back, and I hadn't seen another truck for at least an hour. The GPS map view showed that side road crossing a ravine and reconnecting to a better state route on the other side. Shortcut, basically. Maybe cleared, maybe not. The line glowed bright purple on the screen, as if that proved it existed. I've taken a lot of bad roads in my life. Farm lanes, logging spurs, half-plowed service roads when dispatch swore up and down there was a dock at the end of them. This looked rough, but not impossible. My gut tightened, but the clock in the corner of the screen kept ticking. I signaled and turned. The pavement changed immediately. More cracks, more patches of snow and ice, less of that consistent hum and more of a crunchy, uneven growl. The trees closed in further, branches weighed down with snow, reaching toward the cab like fingers. I dropped to 35, then 30. The GPS zoomed in automatically. Continue on road for 3.4 miles, it said. The little truck icon crept along toward a thin blue line that represented a river or ravine. I couldn't tell which. Up ahead, the trees fell away on either side, replaced by a wider opening. My headlights reached out further now, showing a white expanse and, beyond it, the suggestion of a drop into darkness. That's when I saw the bridge. It looked old, narrow, the kind of thing built back when everything on the road weighed half what I did now. Steel trusses, dark with rust, wooden planks across the span, covered in a heavy layer of snow. The railings were low and tired, half buried in drifts. But it was there, solid, intact. It connected my side of the ravine to something on the other side. A road according to the GPS. My own headlights turned the closest section bright white, shadows from the trusses carving black bars across it. I rolled to a stop about 20 feet from the edge. The truck's air brake sighed, mist puffing from the stacks in the cold. I sat there, staring. The ravine below was just a void. The beams didn't reach far enough to show how deep it went. All I could see was the edge of the drop, then emptiness. The wind came up from it in a cold tongue that tasted metallic and old, as if it had been trapped down there for a long time and was only now being let loose again. My steering wheel vibrated softly in my hands, the tires humming on the compacted snow of the approach. The truck felt good. I'd taken worse bridges with more weight, but something about it made my skin crawl. I grabbed the mic. "Any locals out here on?" I named the county road, gave my mile marker estimate. "Got a narrow bridge over a ravine. You boys use this in winter, or am I about to be an idiot?" Static. A long, unbroken hiss. No voices. Fine. I set the mic down, took a breath, and eased off the brakes. The truck rolled forward. The front tires met the bridge with a subtle change in vibration. The hum changed pitch, deeper and more hollow, like the road noise was echoing inside the structure. Wooden planks under snow flexed a fraction, just enough to tell me they were there. I watched my mirrors as the trailer started onto the span. The guardrails were closer than I liked. Maybe a foot from my tires, little more. Snow sat heavy along the edges in lumpy ridges, untouched by other vehicles. Halfway across, the world shifted. First, it was the feel under the wheel. The vibration faded, not all at once, but in degrees, like the contact between rubber and wood was being cushioned by something that wasn't supposed to be there. The hum became a muted, distant sound. Then sound itself got strange. The engine's rumble dulled, like someone was pressing their palms over my ears. The wind outside disappeared. Even the little rattles and squeaks inside the cab went quiet. For a few seconds, the only sound was my own breathing, too loud in my head. The windshield fogged at the edges, like the temperature had dropped 10 degrees in a blink, frost feathering from the corners. Up ahead, my headlights showed the continuation of the bridge, a familiar pattern of snow-covered planks, trusses arching overhead. And then they didn't. One moment there was more bridge. The next there was nothing. No far end. No road. Just open blackness where the beam should have hit something. It was like someone had taken an eraser and rubbed out the second half of the span. My foot reacted before my brain did. I eased onto the brake. Not a slam, not in that weather, but steady pressure enough to feel the truck resist. The Kenworth responded like it always had, but there was a moment, a long, horrible moment, where I wasn't sure we were attached to anything. The lack of sound, the fading vibration, the way the horizon had become a featureless void. It made my body think we were already falling. I stared ahead, squinting, willing my eyes to find some hint of structure beyond that curtain of darkness. Nothing. No glint of rail. No suggestion of snowdrift. Just a dead, lightless drop. The bridge shook. Not the gentle flex of old planks. A violent, shuddering tremor that ran from the front tires to the back, up through the frame into the cab. The steering wheel jumped in my hands. The hood dipped a fraction, then lifted. I heard something then. Not wind, not creaking timber. A low, drawn-out groan from beneath, deep enough to feel in my teeth, like the sound ice makes when it's about to break under too much weight. The dash lights flickered. The GPS screen glitched, colors smearing, my little truck icon jittering on the line that represented the bridge. For a second, the purple route disappeared, replaced by a blank gray expanse. When the image snapped back, my icon sat in the middle of a white void with the words "NO data" flashing at the bottom. I did something I probably shouldn't have been able to do on that narrow span. I backed up, slow, inch by inch, foot on the brake, hands steady, eyes flicking between the mirrors and the disappearing nothing ahead. The trailer crept backward, the rear axles rolling over planks that I could no longer trust to exist. The shaking came again, harder this time. Something boomed down in the ravine, a hollow thud that didn't match anything I could name. The air in the cab smelled like ozone now. Sharp, metallic, like the air under high-tension power lines right before a storm. My breath fogged the inside of the windshield in quick bursts. The rear tires found solid ground first. I felt the difference instantly, the change in pitch, the fuller vibration. The trailer was off the bridge. The tractor followed, nose inching back until the front wheels thumped off wood and onto packed snow and gravel. I didn't stop. Not until I was a good 30-40 feet from the edge. Then I set the brakes, killed my road lights, and just sat there, breathing like I'd run a marathon in high altitude. The world's sounds rushed back in all at once. Wind whining around the mirrors, engine idling, snow ticking softly against the hood. I turned my headlights back on, pointing them straight at where the bridge had been. There was no bridge. The ravine yawned in front of me in the harsh white beam. Sheer drop, jagged rock walls, a frozen trickle of water far below. Snow clung to the edges in uneven crusts. On the opposite side, the land rose again into trees and darkness. But there was no structure spanning it. No trusses, no planks, no railings, just a clean, unbroken gap. My tire tracks led right up to the edge and stopped a few feet short. No marks on the other side. No sign anything big had crossed there in years. The GPS chimed softly, Make a U-turn when possible, it said in that pleasant, robotic voice. The map now showed my position hovering at the edge of a blank space. The road on the far side of the ravine was a thin gray line, disconnected. I very carefully shut the unit off. I must have sat there 20 minutes, maybe more, hands still on the wheel, watching my own beams bleach the drop, waiting for the bridge to reappear, for the screen to correct itself, for some rational explanation to slide into place. Nothing moved. Eventually, I turned around in a multi-point maneuver that took every bit of focus I had left and retraced my path back to the main county road. The GPS stayed dark. I navigated by dead reckoning, old muscle memory, and the kind of stubbornness that doesn't leave room for panic. I didn't sleep until the sun was up and my tires were parked on a wide, flat, very solid concrete lot. Later, at a little ranger station off the highway, I asked as casually as I could if there'd ever been a bridge on that road over the ravine. The ranger, a woman with gray at her temples and a face that said she'd seen enough winters, nodded. Old timber and steel thing, she said. Closed in the late 90s. Storm washed out the supports. Couple of teenagers went through when the deck gave way. They tore the whole structure down after that. Haven't had the money or the reason to rebuild it. Roads officially closed, far as the county's concerned. I swallowed. Then why's it still on the GPS? She shrugged. Old data. Takes forever for some of those systems to catch up. You're not the first trucker to ask. She paused, then added, You're the first one who looks like he backed out of hell itself, though. I didn't tell her I'd felt the deck shudder under 80,000 pounds of steel like it was real. I didn't mention the way sound vanished or how the bridge ended in midair under my headlights. I still run with a GPS. You have to. World's too complicated now to go back to paper alone. But that unit rides with the volume off more often than not. And anytime it tries to send me down some deserted side road in the middle of the night, especially if there's a ravine on the map, I ignore it. I'll take the extra 100 miles and the late delivery. Because out there, when the sky is empty and the roads are thin and the snow eats the horizon, I know some routes still point to places that aren't really there anymore. Some bridges exist just long enough to remember the weight of someone dying on them. And every time I see that little purple line trying to swing me off into nowhere, I feel that hollow vibration drop out of the wheel again, like the world is about to end under my front axle. I still hear that groan from the ravine, sometimes low and deep, when the engine falls quiet and the CB drops to static. Like something far below is waiting for the trucks that don't hit the brakes in time. Longer this time, drawn out like whoever was saying it was tasting the name. It slid in through the vents, through the door seals, through the glass. I couldn't pin down a direction. It was everywhere and nowhere, right at my ear and 30 yards away on the glacier face all at once. The CB, quiet since I'd parked, crackled. Every hair on my body stood up. I glanced at it. The little backlit channel number glowed dull green. I hadn't touched the thing since shutting down. More static, a low hiss that rose and fell like someone was breathing right into the mic. Then, underneath the static, a faint voice. Mike, you're parked too close. I grabbed the microphone so hard my knuckles went white. Who is this? I asked. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. You up the road? You seeing something I'm not? Silence. Static. The faint whine of the CB's innards doing their job. Then the channel went dead again. Not quiet, dead. Like someone had pulled the plug. The wind outside picked up, or maybe it just changed direction. The tones against the glacier climbed higher. A thin wail that made my teeth ache. The glass in the mirrors vibrated. The air in the cab felt suddenly thin, like the oxygen had been sucked out and replaced with freezer burn. I did something I'm not proud of. I unbuckled, opened the door, and stepped out. The cold hit me like a slap. My breath exploded in white clouds. My boots crunched on the packed snow and ice, the sound too loud in the stillness. The glacier wall loomed to my right, a 50-yard-high face of blue-white ice catching the weak moonlight. The wind curling down off it should have just sounded like wind, rushing, sighing, maybe the occasional whistle. Instead, it moved like words. Mike! It wasn't an echo. Echoes distort. This was my name, spoken in a tone that hovered right between familiar and wrong. Not friendly, not angry, just interested. I walked around the front of the truck, breath coming faster now, eyes glued to the Glacier. The closer I got to the edge of the pull-off, the more the hair on my arms stood on end. My skin prickled under 3 layers of clothing. The smell out there had changed. Less clean snow, more metallic. Ozone like right before a lightning strike. Mixed with something old and faintly sour, like ice that's been lying on top of dead things for a very long time. The glacier's surface moved. Not a big shift. Not a calving chunk or a dramatic crack. Just a subtle, rippling suggestion under the skin of the ice. As if something deeper inside was turning over in its sleep. Mike! This time, the voice came from behind me. I spun so fast I almost slipped. Nobody there. Just my truck, dark and hulking, marker lights reflecting off the ice. Then, from my left, Mike. From the right, Mike. Close, far, above me, under my feet. It didn't sound like one voice anymore. It sounded like a dozen, layered together, all using my name like they were trying it on to see how it fit. My chest felt tight. Every instinct I had screamed at me to get back in the truck, start the engine, and leave the valley behind me. I listened. For once in my life, I listened. I scrambled back into the cab, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands shook as I twisted the key. The diesel coughed once, then roared to life, filling the cab with vibration and noise. The steering wheel hummed under my hands. A solid, familiar feeling that grounded me back in the real world. Outside, the tones against the Glacier rose to a thin, keening wail that cut right through the engine noise. The glass in the windshield trembled. Frost feathered across the bottom corner of the inside of the window, crawling up in delicate white veins. Mike! I didn't care about hours of service anymore. I didn't care about DOT or logs or mandatory rest. I dropped the parking brakes, eased the Kenworth into gear, and rolled out of that pull-off like I was driving on eggshells. As the truck crept forward, the steering felt light, almost floaty, like we were riding on top of something slick and alive. The trailer tugged behind me, protesting the unchained tires on ice. I didn't go fast. 20, maybe 25, just enough to keep moving. The whisper followed. Not outside now. Inside. In the vents. In the CB, which crackled faintly even though I'd switched it off. In the thin space between my ears and the silence in my skull. Mike, too close. For a second, every light on the dash flickered. The gauges all dropped, then bounced back. The GPS screen, which had been blank, flashed on and showed my little truck icon sitting not on the road, but over a pale blue patch with depth lines, like we were parked in the middle of the Glacier. Then the map reset. The icon snapped back onto the highway. The signal came back full strength. Little green bars lit up in the corner of the phone I'd left in its mount. Behind me, the pull-off slipped into the dark. The moment I crossed some invisible line in that valley, the sound stopped. Not faded. Stopped. Like a switch had been flipped. 1 second, the Glacier was singing my name in 50 different pitches. The next, it was just whined again, thin, ordinary, rushing past the mirrors and under the trailer. I drove until the sky turned from black to gray. Drove until my eyes burned and my hands cramped and my whole body buzzed with exhausted adrenaline. I didn't stop for my break until I found a truck stop with concrete under the tires and a whole lot of distance between me and anything that had been frozen longer than my lifetime. Later, over bad eggs and coffee that tasted like someone had recycled yesterday's pot, I mentioned the Glacier to one of the local guys. Old-timer. Knew the road better than the DOT did. He just shrugged. Valley does weird things with sound, he said. Plays tricks. You sit still long enough, you'll hear your mother calling you from under the hood. He forked up some eggs, chewed, then added, almost like an afterthought, don't park right up against the ice anymore myself, though. Not since I heard my boy's voice out there. He's in Arizona. Hasn't seen snow in 10 years. He didn't look at me when he said it. I still run north. Still haul loads to camps where the ice has been there longer than my country has existed. It's good money if you're willing to risk the roads. But I don't park near glaciers anymore. If the pull-off's carved into a wall of blue-white frozen ancient, I keep rolling, logbook be damned, until I find rock or trees or concrete. And on the rare nights when I have to shut down somewhere truly quiet, engine off, CB silent, I hear it again in the spaces between normal sounds, the reefer cycling, the wind nudging the mirrors, my own breath in the dark. A thin, high tone that bends, shapes itself, and almost manages to find my name. I tell myself it's nothing, but I still keep the truck pointed away from the ice, because I know that if I ever let it get close enough again, whatever's under that glacier won't just whisper my name. It'll finish the sentence.